Welcome back to Newsmaker Live, and thank you very much for staying tuned. In a short while, we'll be taking your calls on the program, but we're continuing our discussion with former Foreign Minister Rufus Bousquet, and we're taking a different approach this evening. We're looking at the economy and other issues related to government and our society in general. And we left off on this point where, you know,
right.
and during the break,
I think you were talking about the robots and so on, how that could affect us. Well, first of all, it means that people at a certain level, in terms of a small, or to have some slight technical skills, these people will probably be eliminated in terms of work. But what you do create, though, is another level, because the robot has to be serviced, it has to be built. So you're going to create jobs in perhaps a higher skilled job, higher paying job, and you gain greater efficiencies. Because what's happening with a lot of companies now is you'll find that with less staff, there's more output.
Right.
So companies now looking in terms of productivity, improving their productivity at every turn, cutting out wastage. This is what you're getting, and this is why top line growth seems to consistently improve with many companies in around the world, really, but they're not employing people. In fact, they're laying people off, and it would be very difficult for a government to do that. But what we have found is that if you can create efficiencies, you'd have a lot more money to be able to spend in other areas that can utilize people's skills. The idea of having people on board just so that you can say that they're employed is not a good policy. And people don't like it either, because there's no job satisfaction, there's no job interest.
And there's no sustainability in that, because at some point, even though you employ them in projects, the projects will end. Well, everything will end. And
sustainability is well, we're seeing it every day, because the Prime Minister in his New Year's address painted a rather bleak picture. I don't know if that was his intention, but certainly he painted a very bleak picture. And of course, it was convenient to do so in light of what is being faced with respect to the civil servants. And I must say it was refreshing to hear one of the union leaders say, or at least I heard on the news, that the initial request or the initial demands are certainly not cast in stone, and there is some
it was just a starting point, right?
It is a starting point and so on, and that's refreshing. And as I've always said, it's never for me a question of whether or not people deserve the money, but I do understand that without making specific changes, this will take this country underground if we attempt to pay that. It will really take us over the cliff, and that was my concern, because at the end of the day, everybody will pay for it. But and I'm not being political in that respect, because that's an issue of national importance, and so I understand many persons in the opposition being quiet about it, because it's a little political hot potato and you'd like to see it go certain ways. But nonetheless, we need to put country first at this point in time, because things are not good, and they will not get better unless there are changes. One of the key points I wanted to raise, Clinton, before you move on, and if you'll permit me, is that
that's right, because that was one issue we have to discuss as well.
Yes, one of the problems that we have is that a lot of the decisions that are taken in government are taken in a cabinet in which many persons in cabinet feel that they're being informed. But I found that a number of civil servants at a very high level, they may to some extent advise, but they're not persistent in terms of cautioning the political directorate about the effects of the actions that may be taken. And so there's a tremendous bias in terms of the decision making that is political. And I know a politician will stand there and tell me, and I don't even want to say wrongly so, perhaps rightly so, that look, I'm a politician and it's about me winning elections, so I got to do what I got to do. Okay? But at some point, we as a people recognize that it's not working. There must be perhaps a center of policy action or something, a group of persons who can sit and whom the government respects and will give serious consideration to what they're doing, or to what they say, or to the decisions, or to the advice that's given to the policymakers. Because too many decisions are taken purely on the basis of what the political needs of these individuals are, as opposed to what is in the best interest of the country. And this is where we need to step away. And we need to be strong. And to be respected as leaders, you have to be strong. You have to sometimes go against the grain and tell people, look, you elected me to lead you, and this is what I'm doing.
Now, talking about this, and you know, you brought it up, it's a good segue to get into the wage negotiations. And unions are demanding 16%, or, well, as some of them have said, it was a starting point. The government has offered 1,000 lump sum. You know, which
sounds like nothing.
Yeah, and most civil servants with whom I've spoken have said, you know, this is an insult.
Yeah,
you know, to offer $1,000.
It sounds like an insult to me too, but it may not be, but it just sounds that way.
But I mean, is it really? Is this really an offer? You have been on record. You have gone on record as saying that the economy really cannot afford this increase that the unions have been asking for, and for obvious reasons, because the world is a mess. St. Lucia is part of the world, and therefore the logic would be that if we were to go that route, then we'd be in more serious problems as a country.
Well, they definitely will be. I mean, certainly anything. Look, we're at a time now where you look all over the world, and the union leaders and civil servants know this. You're talking austerity, you're talking cuts, you're talking cutbacks, you name it. We're in a period of tremendous austerity, and people turn around and they feel aggrieved, even insulted, not only by offers such as $1,000, but by even the notion by some persons that if someone were to say, for example, well, there are a whole bunch of people in there who would do nothing. Well, there are people who, you know, there are some very hardworking people, don't get me wrong, very efficient people, very respectful, very service-oriented. But there are, I mean, I know of persons, you know, in government who got paid for years, high-ranking people, and did nothing. I know of one individual who refused to come to work because he said that his office, the office that he was expected to occupy, did not signify his rank, and refused to come to work, and didn't come to work for years and got paid. And you couldn't get rid of him. So nobody's going to tell me that there aren't people in there who just abuse the system. But the other aspect of it is that the public service has become an area where many brilliant people seem to go and retire. You know, it's cushy. It's something where you get a pension at a fairly early age. And our best minds very often gravitate to the public service. And this is one of the reasons why we don't get the bankable projects. Because many of the best people that we send out who get trained, etc., when they come back to St. Lucia, where do they go? They go work for government. They don't get into the private sector because it's too hard. You know, it's not safe. So we've got to do things in terms of policies that are going to encourage these people to want to go out there. Because invariably, it has been proven over and over and over again that a nation is saved by its best minds. And if all of our best minds go into the public service, where they don't even have to think as much in some cases, or where even their area of expertise is not necessarily utilized, then what is happening to the country and its best minds? And we're a small country. We don't have that many, you know, and we need them out there. But people need to see examples of success so that they could fall in that area. And unfortunately, there aren't enough of them. So our people are job-oriented. They're not ownership-oriented. They're not oriented to the idea of, I want to be an owner. I want to control the space I occupy. No, they want to get a job. So even in their upbringing, parents, you know, you have to get a good job. They're taught that. And that is wrong. We need to change that. No, you need to go out there and own it, friend. You need to go out there and say, this is my space. Whether or not I'm carving bamboo and selling it, or whatever the case may be, but I'm controlling the space I occupy, and the government has to encourage it and has to put policies in place to build that spirit of entrepreneurship that is going to make your people truly independent and therefore make your country truly independent.
Now, talking about the policies, and I raised that question before the break a while ago.
Absolutely.
Policies. You have a bunch of politicians coming into office who assume enormous power on entry into government. Most times, and no disrespect, not having the requisite skills to manage, to understand the issues facing the country and the economy, but because of the fact that a majority of people voted for them, they're placed in this position. Therefore, the policies reflect. We're a product of our electoral system, pretty much, because the policy makers are the ones
I understand your question,
that we put there.
But isn't that a huge indictment against us as a people?
I would think so.
I mean, shouldn't the people who are presented a particular candidate say, you must be out of your mind? You're going to send this joker here and ask me to vote for him? I mean, are you crazy? Don't insult me like that. But what will they say? Well, you send a broomstick, I'll vote for it because I'm Labour. So if you get a broomstick, don't complain. You know?
And the other argument is, okay, well, we voted the lesser of the two evils.
I mean, yes. You know, it's ridiculous. It's absurd. Isn't the old saying, and it's absolutely true, that people get the government that they deserve? It is absolutely true. That is what you get. Because you allowed it. You said it's okay. People must now turn around and be more select. You know, it's not just St. Lucia, but we're hoping that we can change St. Lucia. That things have not yet gotten to the point where this country is gone. I mean, people talk about the public debt. Debt is not a problem in a country. Of course, that politicians shouldn't use that to mean that you can just take the people's money and do whatever you want with it and spend it recklessly. But the reality is that if you've got a growing economy, debt is not necessarily an issue. You know, about a week ago, Warren Buffett was out there saying, look, the 6 trillion or whatever debt of the United States is not a problem. The economy is large enough to absorb that. Well, our debt is not a problem if we can get some sustainable growth. The reality, though, is that we've really had no growth. In fact, there has been a contraction of the economy for several years. It has been happening. I mean, never mind what the politicians go during budget speeches and tell you, oh, economy has grown by this and that. Well, in reality, you know, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, there may be growth in some areas and so on, but I have my doubts about the true accuracy of these figures. And then there's real growth, nominal growth, but we won't go into all that. But the reality, though, is that people don't see it. I mean, that's a true measure of growth for me. I mean, the people are seeing jobs are created, people are out there, you know, life is great and so on and so forth. Milk and honey is flowing, as one famous politician once said, you know, in the streets and so on. I mean, that's what people understand. So we have to get back to policies that are going to create growth and do it from within, as opposed to waiting on people to come out and do it.
So do we have
smart money isn't coming to St. Lucia.
Do we have the wrong people making the policies?
I wouldn't say that. But what I would say is that the people need to adjust the basis upon which they make the policies. That I would say at this particular point in time. But recognize, as I said, the smart money isn't coming to St. Lucia. The smart guy who is a brilliant entrepreneur isn't coming to St. Lucia to try and open a hotel and do this and that and the other. The opportunistic individuals are coming here because they're the ones who are out there looking at things and saying, oh, guess what? Well, these people aren't smart enough and they're a little desperate. So this is where I can come and get over. And we need to be careful. Okay? And you know, you see that when you find that, and I'm not talking, this is not a blanket thing for everybody. I mean, there may be individuals who have a vested interest here and there, but nonetheless, overall, this is what you get. And this is why we've been taken advantage of to the extent that you hear, well, land goes to people to do this and that and the other, and then it disappears and government's left holding the bag. You know? I want
to talk about that, so don't lose that thought.
Don't talk about it too much because I may not necessarily say too much about it.
Well, I'll ask you anyway. Stay with us. Newsmaker Live will continue after this, and also we'll be taking your calls, so stay close to your telephones. to get into that line and be part of our conversation here for the first program for 2013. Stay with us.